voice of Indonesia.
Hello, my listener. Welcome back again to our special interview. And as usual, of course, I have a special guest for today, Dr. Gracia Paramitha. She is actually the international relations observers from Indonesia who are recently joined in BRICS meeting. Actually, at the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Summit recently from August 22nd to 24th that will be held in South Africa, where President Joko Widodo also attended the meeting, the summit. And want to know exactly what Dr. Gracia Paramitha is doing in the BRICS meeting. So can you tell us a little bit, Dr. Gracia? Welcome to our show.
Hello, I'm Gracia, or you can call me Grace. So I just recently joined the BRICS Postgraduate Forum. It's the second forum that the BRICS scholars have been doing, and that was held in Cape Town, one of the very beautiful city in South Africa. And that forum has discussed 5 different clusters or 5 different themes. So they are about new development banks, and then climate emergency, the people-to-people and sustainable tourism, and also about the challenge of political and economic governance, as well as the entrepreneurship theme. So those are the 5 criteria or 5 groups. So the scholars were divided into 5 groups, and a lot of master and PhD students were doing presentations related to that topics.
Okay. So in that summit, actually, you are also presenting something about the dollarization. There's a lot of crowd, right? And it's became a little bit popular here in Indonesia while you were in BRICS about the de-dollarize or compete with the US dollar, which had existed previously. And what exactly is the Indonesia's positions regarding to these issues?
Well, Indonesia hasn't decided formally whether Indonesia would be the permanent committee member or the member states of BRICS or not. But if we talk about the de-dollarization, that's actually the main agenda, how BRICS could be the new world order in contending or competing the powerful IMF or World Bank as the global multilateral financial institutions. And Indonesia hasn't made any certain or further statement how this de-dollarization could be contributed or affected to Indonesia or even ASEAN as the regional institutions for Indonesia. So my point here, when I joined the BRICS Postgraduate Forum, I mainly became the chair for climate emergency issues, but I also joined the New Development Banks cluster. It is interesting that a lot of researchers or academia and the PhD students were observing and exploring how possible the new currency of BRICS could be the contending or the competitor of dollar, especially the US dollar, and how the gold coin system. So these BRICS members haven't decided whether they use, for example, ruble or use yuan or other currency of each members to be
or new currencies maybe
this dollarization, but they tried to start with gold peg system, as well as how the US started their fixed system before it's going to be the floating rate exchange or the floating system. So that's the emerging stage, how BRICS respond the US dollar hegemony, or the way they also press or make a repression to the Russian as the economic sanction. And it is quite possible that in the next few years, 3 years perhaps, that BRICS could be, making this dollarization happen. at least we can try to see how the local currency can be, competitive assets, either within the BRICS or even beyond BRICS, like how the local currency of each BRICS members were formulated into the new development banks. And that's why there is a specific term called contingent reserve agreement. And this CRA is actually like the mechanism how each BRICS members manage the liquidity when there is a global crisis happen, especially the monetary crisis or financial crisis. So this CRA can be like such a buffer or the alternative way to solve or at least to reduce the tensions or the economic sanctions that might coming from the US or other Western sides to maybe so sort of like compete BRICS. So maybe that's something that I can, give uh, enlightenment about this de-dollarization.
It's interesting actually because I just find out about this and get to know a lot from you right now, and I think it comes to my mind actually. If we want to change the currencies, like we want to change dollar for every kinds of trade in every country around the world, what would the currency would be, right? What kinds of currency did they use? And you said earlier gold could be one of the choices. Yeah, and from the BRIC summit, gold could be one of the choices. And is it digital currencies also one of the choices in the BRIC summit?
Yeah, they are still discussing and seeing the feasibility of using cryptocurrency as one of the digital transaction. But before going further to, you know, maximize the usage of cryptocurrency, they are trying to build or institutionalize what it's called the digital currency bank system,
Oh,
because there should be the integrated mechanism. I think this is quite reflected how the G20 financial track just remain from the G20 Indonesia presidency last year. So in G20 there is already a platform or sort of like a mechanism of making the integrated digital currency bank system. While in BRICS, it's still very early discussion. They haven't decided the mechanism itself or any indicators to, create the further collaboration for that. But there is already, like they're mentioning, they're already talking, make a conversation about the possibility or the feasibility to create this digital currency. And then they might continue to explore further how cryptocurrency and how the combination between gold pack system and crypto could be,
one of the choices.
hand in hand, yeah, to be some alternatives of their currencies as well in the future.
Yeah, but anyway, we owe a lot, right? The debt in IMF, also the currency is using dollars, and if the dollar will change its currency, what do you think will happen to the country who owe a lot to the IMF or who has a huge debt for each country? Because the currency will be very much different, right, in every country,
Yeah.
like from dollar
Yeah.
to rupiah, or from dollar to dollar Singapore or dollar Australia's and everything. And the currencies will also change. And that's the same thing that will happen with if we were changing the currencies into gold. So what is the greatest effect for the countries who owe or who have debt to the IMF if the dollar is changing?
Okay, let me share an interesting book that was written by Alex Gladstein, and it's titled Hidden Repression: How the IMF and World Bank Sell Exploitation as Development. And that book highlights the hidden secrets or sort of like hidden stories that IMF and World Bank don't necessarily, promote or create a sustainable development or even equal rights to development for developing countries
Ah,
by creating loan or any kind of investments.
right.
So to respond this book and seeing the fact of BRICS making the new development banks and also the upcoming currency perhaps, I think those two are, you know, the compelling, I would say, or sort of like appealing asset that the world is fastly changing. Like the dynamics of world politics are inevitably, moving a lot, and there should be some choices of new world order, and that's why right now actually it is a fact, like it is happening that some of the local currency or even the transaction
Mhm.
among BRICS members are making or using their own currencies instead of the US dollar. So for example, like the South African bank, they already joined the new development banks in Shanghai. That's the headquarter. And in the last 2 years, by using yuan and also some other currencies of BRICS, South African bank could increase their investment up to 2.8 billion US dollars. That's one of the great, I would say, great benefit how they maximize the components or some of the assets from each members of BRICS currencies. So that's how simple thing that, small step that maybe it could be multipolar, like it could be multiplying the other countries
Yeah.
that we can do something to contend US dollar. There is an alternative way to contend the US dollar. And if that happened, like nowadays, that when Russian got so many sanctions, including the embargo and how the Russian ruble wasn't that, heavily impacted to the US, and how the US dollar kept pressing the other countries to remain that system. So this BRICS currency or the de-dollarization is also sort of like a new call to developing countries or other emerging countries that we can do something new, like we can renew or reform the existing multilateral system, especially in financial and trade system. And I think that this is not a threat. Well, it could be a threat, of course, for West countries, but
Yes.
it isn't always a threat, as Indonesia already got a good principle by promoting free and active foreign policy, which means Indonesia could actually strategically maintaining or playing their diplomacy with either Western side or even the BRICS or even with China per se. So these kind of options are some good reconsiderations for Indonesia to strengthen their diplomacy in a global world, or in a world communities.
And of course, this is also has a great impact to Indonesia and also in Southeast Asian countries itself, right?
Yes.
Because if we change a lot, even though let's just say people think like, oh, we only change the currencies, it will make it easier for us to do transactions between countries, especially in Asian, but it gives so many kinds of effect, including to the Asian countries. And seen after Indonesia becomes the head of the Asian summit earlier, how what do you think the greatest effect for Indonesia in the Asian countries itself, and this currencies changing, and not only in financial sector, I think the impact will be greater, right? Not
Yes.
only in the financial sector, but also in tourism sector, and perhaps in tourism sector as well, and so many kinds of others, including industries,
Yes.
which Indonesia and Southeast Asians right now are trying to thrive to the world, and shows the world that we are also existing in this 5.0 industries player, right? So how do you see this kinds of impact in the
Indonesia
summit itself?
under the, yeah, So under Jokowi's presidency, I think Indonesia has grown so much, especially when we talk about the foreign politics or the diplomacy itself, especially with the global leaders, multilateralism, starting from G20 and then ASEAN, and now in Jokowi also revive and revitalize the spirit of Indonesia with South countries or global South countries, and also, of course, the Asia African Conference. The Bandung spirit was, the fundamental way that Indonesia, it's sort of like, hey, Indonesia, we're back. Like we're
Yeah.
back to the global arena, to not just to the developed countries, but even engage more developing countries and small island states, for example. So to answer your questions about the impact, first, yeah, of course, we can see how the digital currency, the financial sector, and with the CRIS, the QR code, Indonesia also initiated how to expand the CRIS or the QR going to ASEAN-based system, or sort of like the integrated QR digital currency. But if we go further into one of the economic aspect, like the micro, small, medium enterprise, the MSMEs, Indonesia has a strong uniqueness in that part because 65 million MSMEs are now like growing up in Indonesia within the digital technology. And these numbers are sort of like compelling numbers, like a very potential numbers to invite more investors from BRICS, especially, and to influence them as well that Indonesia has very well established of digital infrastructure. As simply we can see the digital roadmap. We already got the digital roadmap for even MSMEs. That didn't happen in South Africa. South Africa is still dealing with their infrastructure itself, like how they ensure that there is internet access to big lands in comparison to us, with many lands, and maybe the digital divide might be more difficult. But again, the policy and the regulatory mechanism from Indonesia is there, while South Africa might not have it yet to see the potential and the feasibility of the internet access, and also the inclusiveness spirit. So when we see the Bandung spirit as a sort of like soft power diplomacy, that also reflects how inclusiveness, how gotong royong, the spirit of communality becoming strength of increasing the trade between Indonesia among ASEAN, or even Indonesia with other emerging countries. And that should be the sort of like pilot model to South Africa or even other BRICS countries, that we need like a key principle or values when we develop something, either digital economy or even the digital access to education. Because it is interesting when I talk with some professors from Brazil, from South Africa, Russia, and also India, they said, especially in Brazil and South Africa, they both didn't have like an integrated platform which can, engage or even um, bridge or even, gather all levels of primary schools until higher educations, like what
Like a
we've got Campus
forum
Merdeka. Merdeka Belajar, Campus Merdeka is sort of like an innovative pilot
programs.
model that we can share to BRICS members, especially to South Africa and Brazil. They're quite surprised when I told them that despite the lack of digital asset or digital connection, or maybe the other lacking, but still the curriculum of global diversity, kebinekaan, and then how Kampus Merdeka, Merdeka Belajar, the freedom of learning, that one-stop integrated platform multiply more opportunities from different students, diverse places all over Indonesia, and how the digital access can fasten and accelerate their tools, using these apps by making and empowering them. So
Okay.
empowering inclusiveness is also a strength that Indonesia could pioneer or even lead the BRICS members, that we also have something special that we will offer, or we can discuss further about the further collaboration with BRICS.
For me, personally, I think from all the international events that Indonesia has become the pioneer, innovators, and ahead of other countries, leaders becoming a leaders, and I think this is quite amazing because from all these years we've only been a followers, right? We've never
Yes.
lead, and this is the first time Indonesia had a chance to lead in international forum, and this is quite amazing for me. So many like the G20, the Asian summit, and then right now we got BRICS, and even I think most of the European countries right now are holding the spirit of Indonesia's like gotong royong, because so many how do you say it, so many kinds of disasters that happens to their countries, and their leaders actually trying to hold the gotong royong principles in their own countries to their people, and it's quite amazing for me personally as a person and as an Indonesian. Of course, it's making me proud and working harder than ever.
Yeah.
So this is quite amazing. Do you have any kinds of I would really love to talk a lot with you more about this BRICS informations, because I think it's really helpful for our listener and also our viewers to know more about what exactly BRICS is, and why do all the 22 countries have to hold BRICS forum, right? And it's
Yes.
quite amazing. So thank you very much for being here. Dr. Grace, thank you very much. The time is quite short. Actually, my producer's outside is already queuing. So thank you very much for being here.
No problem. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And success for you, Dr. Gracia. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And listener and of course viewers, that was our short interview with Dr. Gracia Paramitha, who is also an international observer of international relations observers, and from Indonesia recently, who are presenting some Indonesian programs to the world in BRICS forum. So Nukas Kusumawati signing out, and have a great day and always love Indonesia. Voice of Indonesia, from Indonesia to the world. See you again next time.
Voice of Indonesia.